Some things never cease to amaze me. Sunrises, hitting a golf ball straight, and the overwhelming ignorance of the common person. Here's a thought. Use Form Bs to determine classification. This, in fact, is competitive balance. Season 8 of Sun Coaches Podcast, where not everyone is funny or tells funny stories, but everyone has a story. Welcome to Sun Coaches Podcast, Season 8, and today I'm very excited to be joined by one of the best of us. He's born in Boston, Massachusetts, but actually grew up in Morrow as his family moved down. He's coached all over the place. He is definitely an old head and a very, very much represents being a gentleman of the game. Coach Tony Lotti at Seckinger High School. Thanks for being on with me.
Oh, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to this one.
Well, Coach, I said that you actually were born in Boston, and you told me off air that y'all moved down. Your dad worked for Delta, and you grew up in Morrow. So what was growing up in Morrow like for the pilot for a daddy?
Well, I can tell you, it's one of those things that talk about how things changed over the years. You know, I went to Morrow High School. That's where I played my high school ball. I went to elementary school at Lake Harbin Elementary, and now it's called McGarrett Elementary. And it's funny because Bill McGarrett, who's at Woodward, which that's who we got stuck playing in the first round of playoffs this year. You know, his dad was my principal. So that's, you know, I tell people, you know, when you went to the school and it's named after the principal that you had when you were in school, yeah, you've been around a minute. So, but it was really, even back then at Morrow, you know, after the games, you know, a lot of us would meet our parents down at the Shoney's, you know, and do the breakfast buffet, and you know, it was always more community type things. You know, everybody was always involved, and you're always hanging out at somebody's house. And you know, back then, you knew all you had to do was look and see where all the bikes were, where they were parked, right? And I guess only spankings I got, so to speak, was because Dad come home and would chew up somebody's yard. But, you know, back then we were outside playing those games that, you know, was tackling man with football, and see there I can be very political when I need to be. Or it was, you know, shooting baskets at somebody's house, and we just always outside. So I played high school ball for Bud Theodosian, who's been around a long time. I don't know if you even know this story, Mox, but there was my high school, one of our big rivals was Newman, so it was always Morrow Griffin, Newman LaGrange. Those were kind of the rivals, and Max Bass, who was the head coach at Newman. Well, we came out after warm-ups and to start the game, and they were wearing jerseys that were the colors of the football.
Yeah, I've heard.
Do you know that story?
Well, somebody's told me that he had done that before, but he claimed that it was gold, the Texas gold or something.
It was, and with white trim, you know, and so I just remember, because I played in that game. I was a junior that year, and I just remember Coach Theodosian going ballistic. Well, we ended up winning, but, you know, there's certain of those stories that are out there, and I can attest to that one because I was on the field and saw it myself. So, you know, I think that's part of the reason why we have to go through uniform restrictions when we're buying plays 10 years from now kind of deal, right? So, but yeah, so I grew up in Morrow and left there, and it was crazy because some of the lessons, when I was in high school, I was a quarterback, but the niche that I kind of found was as a punter, and had an opportunity to go to the University of Georgia, and then one of the mistakes I made was, you know, back then they'd say, you don't worry about the SAT, you get enough points for, you know, just putting the name on the paper. And well, that's not true, Coach, because I didn't score enough. I took it the last time I could take it and whatnot, and so then I ended up going up to Tennessee Wesleyan is where I ended up playing my college ball, and then I got invited to training camp with the Patriots in '90, and kind of, then, you know, I only keep one, so it's one of those deals I end up having to get a real job, so to speak. I did not go, I went into the business world. So after college and after I was cut from them, and the Falcons had me in for a private tryout, and things just didn't work. And had gotten married, and we had our first kid on the way. And as I said, we got to get a real job, something that's stable. And so I actually went to work for Atlanta Gaslight Company. And so I ended up working there for about 10 years, and I was in management for them. And I was actually appointed to a position. I had a position when the Olympics were in Atlanta in 1996. So I did that for the American Gas Association, and then from there I had my own business off to the side. And then I ended up branching in after almost 20 years in the business world to where a buddy of mine, they were opening Union Grove High School, and a buddy of mine was named the first head coach and athletic director. My dad suddenly he died of a brain hemorrhage at 54. And so what happened was I went up to the school because it was literally like a mile up the street from the school to see him. We had been teammates our whole college career together. His name was Scott Mason. And got up there and I was just congratulating him. And, next thing I know, he's talking to me into coaching. And so he's like, I need to take over special teams and things like that. So I actually started my career on the community coach program. So, which was a whole nother ordeal, working full time during the day and then getting to school about 3:00. It was funny because I was there 7 years. And people would come and ask me, Coach, where's your classroom? We tried to come. I was like, well, I don't have one. I don't get to school until 3. So that's how I started my coaching career, was actually on the community coach program. I wanted to give back. I wanted to be around him and try to help him be successful. And it's a whole different deal if you've never done a new school before. And of course, now I'm on my third one, which school I'd never do. I'll never lie about it, but here I am. So, but that's how everything kind of got started.
So when you got to Union Grove, what made you decide that you needed to go ahead and get fully certified and into education?
I was spending so much time at the school, and at this point, I was self-employed. I had some real estate businesses, and, on all honesty, it was back in 2007, and any realtor that happens to listen to this, the real estate market tanked. And so what happened was I'd spent so much time up there, I didn't bankroll as much as, you're supposed to do to get you through those bad times. And so, but I felt like God was pulling me there. I'd started a league while I was at Union Grove called the Union Grove Gladiators, along with my coach in varsity there. And basically it just always bothered me that there was an opportunity for kids with abilities to play organized football, right? And we had a manager who he just wanted to play. So I kept asking people, hey, let's do this. And at the end of the day, everybody kept saying no, but our principal, I pitched it to him, Rodney Bowler at the time, and I told him, I said, look, and he even asked me, he said, well, Coach, if one of the kids want to play, and I said, well, I'm good with that. I said, the problem is right now they don't have an opportunity to play. So he let me run with it. And then the next thing I know, somebody contacted Fox 5, and I become really good friends with Blaine and Butland and all those guys, because they actually came out and covered that about 20 years ago. And so it's pretty awesome because it ended up spreading that league. It was called the FHL Flag Football League, which I didn't want any labeling associated with it. I know you're in special ed, and actually I ended up going into special ed, and that's what I went back to school for when I transitioned over at Woodland. So to go in, I went back to school. I did the dual program. I got my master's and my teacher certification in one program, and I was asked to move over and help start Woodland High School in Stockbridge. So went over there. So I entered in, at 40 years old. Go back to school to get my master's. I'm helping start a brand new school again. And back then, provisional pay was just that. It was provisional. It wasn't, what teachers quote make. And so, with a wife, a mortgage, and 3 kids, but I felt like that's where God was sending me. So I go over there and actually started a team there, the Woodland Warriors, in conjunction with doing the varsity with the guys there. And so it's still going on. And the Special Olympics now actually have flag football in there. It's pretty cool. They took the model of kind of what I put together, and so the kids get to play there, and they're still playing. And it actually went off into Pennsylvania. This thing, God just kept blessing it. So for what everybody said you can't do with these kids, it just kept blooming. And so I would fly into Pennsylvania once a year for their last game up there in downtown, and we would have a banquet, and I'd get to do those things with those kids up there. And so they just actually had a reunion for the Gladiators because they're still playing down at Union Grove all those years later. So, for me, that's what got me in full time. It wasn't just the hard knocks of the real estate community and what happened there, but doing that with Michael, and he kept saying, "Coach, you got to coach me, you got to coach me," and that's why I started. And actually, what my book on that, the story got published, and he's kind of the main character in it. But so I went back to school, and I actually got my master's degree in cross-categorical special education. So all the disability categories, so to speak, with the exception of severe and profound. I struggled with that one because of the fact I kind of get close to the kids, building that relationship. And so anyway, when I went over to Woodland, I was teaching, you ready for this? I was teaching actually 4 preps as a brand new teacher and resource English. All right, because literature, I kind of enjoyed that. But I was teaching American Lit, 9th grade Lit. Yeah, I mean, you name it. Back then we had the EOC test, right, the end of course test, and we had the graduation test. So anyway, that's how I ended up getting in. I just felt like God was telling me this. And Mr. Bowler had said it to me one day at school. He said, "I'm going to get you in these classrooms before this is all over with." And I was like, "No, you ain't. I'm not taking that kind of pay cut. I'll see you at 3:00. Well, God had other plans. So, I ended up, it was crazy too, because back then, in order to get the provisional certificate, right, you had to, it was up until then, you could work in the school for a while, and then they gave you so many years to take the test. The year God was putting me in, you had to take the GACE test first, and you had to pass them before they could give you the provisional. And Coach, I'm telling you, now I've worked with kids, but I didn't know, IDA and all the stuff that you got to know. I had no clue. And so here I needed a job and literally drove down to Sandy Creek High School. That's where I was taking the GACE test. And I'll never forget that certain things, turning points in your life that when God pulls. And I sat in that car and I knew I couldn't pass those tests. I just knew I couldn't. And I just said out loud, I said, "All right, God, if you want me to go into education, then you got to pass these tests because I know I can't do it. So you got to help me either guess the right way or whatever." And so when it came time, I don't know if you remember back then, remember you used to there was a certain time of day and you'd log in and it'd tell you if you passed or not. Yeah. Remember that? Yeah. And so I'm staring at the clock. I'm like I was waiting for you to call me, right? I'm like, okay, we'll be on at 7:00. Here we go. And I'm staring at that thing. And Coach, when the scores popped and I had passed both of those sped tests, I just stood there in my home office by myself and I just cried. I was like, okay, you win. I'll go into teaching. And because it's funny because a couple of other people that took it with me that we were trying to cram going, studying, and they didn't pass. And so I was like, okay. So here I go into to help build Woodland and start in that. And we're trying to set things up. We didn't even have a CO in the building yet, and so go there. I was there 4 years, 4.5, almost 5 years, and then I got the call about coming up this way and going to West Hall. So, and that was, West Hall was technically my first head football job.
Yeah, that's an awesome story because I told somebody today, I go down every day, and I guess I'm supposed to stay with my class, but I just go down, and we have 3 self-contained classes that they're teaching to work kind of classes, life skills, things like that. I love those kids. I've fallen in love with those kids. They love me. They love seeing me every day. And our first day back with kids was yesterday, so I got to see 2 of the classes, but the other class was off at PE, so I didn't get to see him. So anyway, I go down there today, and one of the little girls is very autistic, and she's very bright, but she's a spectrum kid. And she goes, "Coach Lamb, will you sing with me?" And I said, "Well, I don't know if I'll know the words." And she goes, "Oh, you'll know this song." And her and I sang the Grinch song. Karaoke. And when I walked out of there, Coach, I told the administration, I said, "There is no way that my day can get any better
That's awesome.
There's nothing else that can happen. And I encourage everyone out there that if you're having a bad day, go hang out with those kids for about 5 minutes. And after you get hugged to death and loved to death, you're going to feel better.
Well, and that's 100%. And that's what when people ask me, because when it came, I was very adamant that, even the slogan I came up with for the league was because we can, because everybody kept asking why. And I was like, why? Because the kids want to play. And if they don't want to play, then fine, at least they had the opportunity. And so when we go through that whole thing, people would ask me, I said, well, what I'm adamant on is there won't be any labeling with this. None. So there won't be any types dictate. And I said, my thing was, people want to say these kids are special, and I agree. But if your definition of special is how somebody can make you feel so good about yourself, then definitely they're special.
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, my son's on the spectrum, and he's a different kind of dude, and we've never gotten the label. All we know is he's on the spectrum. He's probably Asperger's, but they haven't come out and said whatever, but he's obviously, socially, he's not quite caught up with his age group and things like that. So, and all of my degrees are in either biology or kinesiology. I'm going to be a PE teacher, and I've spent a bunch of money to get all these degrees. And lo and behold, the plan the whole time for me was you're going to teach special ed and work with these kids.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I loved
every minute of it.
And I think I told you when I saw it at the recruiting fair that, what I love about it is I love seeing on social media and seeing the relationship you have with your son. And somebody asked me the other day, well, what kind of things do I follow on? I still call it Twitter. I can't get used to X, but I love following coaches and when they post things about their families and things like that, because what's happened is we've gotten away from that. We spend so much time with other people's children, and to see, a coach, spend time with his family and building those relationships and knowing that there's nothing more important than that. I love seeing that. I love celebrating that. It's one of those things that, I learned a lesson. I wish there's some things I could go back early in my career. Let's be honest, I was in school. I'm now taking over, helping build a new school and doing all these things. And that took a lot of time. Back then, it was believed you had to be in the office 82 hours or you weren't working. So to me, I love seeing those things. And that's, even with my staffs here and when I was at West Hall, if my coaches had kids who trick-or-treating age, it was very important to me that I made sure that they were home to go trick-or-treating with their kid. And I talk about this all the time with my guys. I've been very fortunate at the schools I've been at that the only time I've not had some of my coaches is because we're able to get them promoted to head jobs, right? And they're able to move up, which is, I feel like, is part of my responsibility as well. But, I get him home, and then he brought me back. It was a piece of construction paper that his son, I forget, Brandon Miller, and his little boy had put a Snickers bar and tape to it. And just said, Coach, thank you for letting my dad be there to go trick-or-treating with me. And I never forgot that. I still have it. Not the Snickers bar. I ate the heck out of that. But, because those things are important, and that's one of the things we talk about, too, as a staff. Look, we've got a job to do, but it can get done. And I'll be honest with you, I've had terrible seasons where we worked 100 hours, and then we've had terrible seasons. At some point, you got to look at the dudes, right? You need some kids to make some plays. But with that, and that's the other thing I tell them, too. So, oh gosh, I hope I'm not getting off topic here, but like with COVID, for example, a lot of people are like, why didn't you stay with the Zoom calls, okay, for coaches' meetings and things? And my guys, we still come in for a little bit on Sunday afternoon. All right. And it's because of this, though. One of the things that I believe in teaching and what we're trying to do, and God knows I'm trying to get better at it every day, is to be where your feet are, right? Be where your feet are. Well, if you're home and you're spending, 8 hours on the computer doing huddle work for our program, and your kid's out there somewhere else for 8 hours at Xbox, well, how good is that time, right? But if you're in me, we knock it out for 2 hours, or whatever, we eat together, and I make sure they're home, but so they can tuck their kids in bed. But at least that way we get that separation. Because when you're home, I want you to be dad. I don't want you getting engulfed in this. And I think that's the trend that, when I was at West Hall, people would probably laugh and say, well, that's why he's never won a state championship. Well, I've also won region titles at places that have never won in 30-year school history either. And the bottom line is, I don't start our summer program until that week of June 11th, June 13th. So when we get done with spring practice, and I tell the kids, go be a kid, go to camps, go fishing, go do whatever you want. But, we're going to work hard when we're here those couple of days in June when we do come back. But I want you to go do that time. I want you to spend that time with your family. I tell my coaches, Coach, I don't bring them up there. Go spend time. Because here's the other reality of it too, Coach. I can't pay what some of these places are throwing money out there. I can't have it. I don't have it. So at some point, you have to make a decision. What is your time worth? Okay, so if you have basically 3 weeks off to start the summer to spend with your family, what is that worth to you? Is that worth $5,000? Is it worth $10,000? I don't know. At some point, because the one thing I know, you can always make more money, but what you don't get back is time.
There ain't no doubt. And that's when Signetti came on the other day and said that he doesn't keep up with how long they stay there. They're just expected to do their job, and when they're done, they go home. And while they're there, they work. I'm like, thank you so much. It was refreshing to hear a major college football, a very successful major college football coach point out that, especially, he didn't say this part, but I say this part, with the technology we have now that we didn't have when we started or when I started. When you were having to hand draw everything in a 3-ring binder, then you had to go back and figure out the tendencies by hand. Yeah, I get having to stay up 8, 9, 10 hours to get that done. But with the way Huddle works now, there is no reason other than you don't want to be at home for you to do that kind of thing.
And there is some of that too now. I get it. There's some of that too.
Yeah, no, I get it, but I don't like it. But that ain't me. You know what I mean?
That ain't me either.
I'm like, look, man, if we can't, 4, 6, 12, how Camden County used to have 22 assistants, the bigger programs have that many. If y'all have to take that long to do it, something's wrong with y'all.
Yes.
Because it shouldn't take that long. 4 adult men should be able to figure out. It's football, for God's sakes. And Huddle.
It's either an odd front or an even front, right?
Block. Get ball to your dude.
Yeah, it's great. Well, it's funny because I would hope that if you ever talk to anybody that's been with me and we've done this thing together, that the one thing I've always tried to do is find the best people. Not only non-negotiable whenever I've gone in, whether it was when I was asked to take over West Hall and try to turn that one, or Appalachian or Seckinger, was that my only non-negotiable was, and I knew there was going to be all kinds of problems. I knew the things weren't going right, but don't make me keep somebody I don't want to keep. And so the very first thing I always do is, as I set up and I want to sit down and I want to talk to every coach there, because to me it's just the same as trying to treat someone the way I'd want to be treated. Because whenever a head coach leaves, the guys who are there, there's that stress on their family of who's going to get the job? Am I going to get the job? If I don't get the job, who's going to get it? Are we going to have to move? All this. So I sit down immediately as fast. Even one time I did it before I was technically announced, and I was like, I don't know, I may have broke the rules, but I think it's important for guys to know, are we going to gel together? This is what I believe. This is how it's going to be. How do you feel? Where's your priorities? Are those things? And we have that conversation because it's just so important to me. And then we, as we outline the responsibilities and as we go through, because no matter what, pretty much every place has its issues. I was joking with somebody. I said, I'm kind of trying to be like the Wizard of Oz there, pay no attention to the guy behind the curtain. But it's one of those things that I've taken pride in, the fact that I try extremely hard to take care of the guys that I'm with and their families. I genuinely care about them and their children, and I hope they see that and they feel that. And our strength coach, who I spent 6 months trying to get this guy, right? John Patrick, super guy. He's out right now because him and his wife just had their first baby. So he's out for these few weeks. So I believe so hard in you bring in the best people and you let them do what you brought them there to do, right? As a head coach, and it's a CEO, that's how this thing's been. And so I've let them coach. David Seawright calls all the offensive plays on Friday night. Now, is it with feedback and information from me? Sure, but he calls those. Same thing defensively. Well, John, he runs our strength program. And so right now he's out. So I'm in there with him anyway, but John's the expert. I'm more of his assistant. Do you need me to go get you some water? What do you need me to do while you're getting our kids better? And so anyway, he's been out the last few days. So DC, we made some changes. So we put the sub upstairs, right? So defense coordinator Scott Ryder, another great dude on the face of the planet. He comes down, so he's with me in there. So we're printing out some stuff, and he said, "So why are we printing these?" I said, "I don't know. Coach Patrick said print them." And so he said, "Well, could we do it this way?" We didn't know. Coach Patrick said, so we're doing it the way Coach Patrick said. So if he listens to this while he's home taking care of that new baby, yes, Coach, we're doing exactly what you told me to do. And I get it, I'm the head coach, but you're the man. And so I'm a smart enough guy to know I don't know everything. If I don't, I try to find it. But I pride myself in being blessed. And that's been my only prayer, or my first prayer whenever I've been asked to go in and try to turn a program around is, God, please, if you're going to let me do this, please put the right men and people and women in my path that will help make this, because nobody's going to believe we can do anything there. I mean, last year at Seckinger, we were given, this past season, a 0% chance of making the playoffs. Do we have some good nights? Yeah. Kids played hard. Yeah. Some nights it was all right. We got in, first time in school history. But, it's funny when all these projections come out and everything else. I'm the guy that still believes, Coach, that football program in high school should be an extension of the educational process, period. I'd like to say that I've got kids that I'm forming for the NFL, but that's not there. It's just not. But what I care about is the fact that, and I got a call today from one of my former players who I love having forward guys on staff. I love being back around them, and it means more to me that they still want to be around me, right? They had to if they wanted to play football, but and the tough thing that people don't see too is the decisions we have to make. And, my obligation is to do what's right and fair to all the kids in the program, not just one. And sometimes, people have a hard time with understanding that. But, sometimes it's not about you, it's about everybody. And I just believe that I'm really worried about the trend I tend to see, that's going on. I'll tell you this, and maybe you can tell me, hey, Coach Shep, you're going too crazy, you don't want me here, but I had this said to me this past year, and there was a parent, and the parent literally said this to me. They said, "Well, Coach, you want to know what the knock is on you. We love you, but you want to know what the knock." I'm like, "Sure, right?" They're going to tell you anyway. And she said, "Well, you won't go out and recruit kids to get them to come here so we can win a state championship." And I was floored, because I believe that in our thing that we have as a staff and what we talk about all the time is my expectations are that we are to model the behavior we want to see out of these young people. And I believe in teaching servant leadership and everything that goes with that. And so when that comment was said to me, I was floored, because I was like, I'm far from perfect, but I try to always do the right thing. And so I sat back and let that hit me. And then, to be honest with you, I said to her, I said, well, and then she goes like this. She said, "Coach, I know it's against the rules, but everybody else is doing it." And I said, "Well, hold on a second." I said, "First of all, everybody else is not doing it. I know a lot of people that are out there busting their tail for kids and trying to do it the right way. So not everybody's doing it." I said, "But the thing I would pose to you is, if I was to do that, and I bring somebody in that puts your son on the bench, how are you going to like me then?" And then, the conversation kind of turned, but I had to call one of my mentors on the way home, and I was like, this hurt me more than anything, because, I think there should be integrity. I think, all these things, and like I said, I am far from perfect. I don't ever claim to be, but it's one of those things. I try to do the right thing, but when it's openly asked like that, and, I don't know, it was one of those things that it just goes back to my faith, and what I'm going to have to do is do what I feel like God wants me to do, and at the end of the day, I have to hope that that's right.
And that's all you can do, because if you don't, you're going to have to call coachingportfolio.com, because if you're a coach gearing up for the job search,
or I got to call Coach Jaska. I got to get that guy to help me, right? Find another job.
Oh yeah, because if you're a coach gearing up for the job search, you already know your portfolio can make or break your next opportunity. At coachingportfolio.com, we help coaches at every level stand out with elite professional grade portfolios, resumes, and interview prep tools. From ready-to-use templates to custom-built documents, we take the guesswork out of the process. Whether you're chasing your first job or your dream job, be prepared, be polished, and be unforgettable. Visit coachingportfolio.com and make your next move with confidence. And see, he's a coach too that runs the company. So he knows what we have to do. So you start off in the business world, you got your community coach, you help open 2 schools, and then West Hall calls and that's your first official head coaching job. What was that like?
Well, how about this? So when I left that morning to go on an interview, you ready for this? Coach, I was going to a second interview at Douglas County High School. And so the new GHSA executive director, he was actually the principal at Douglas County. But we go there, and one of the things that I've always felt passionate about is I don't think you should looking for another job. I don't think that's fair to the people that one brings you there, or two that to the kids there, right? If you're constantly taking a job to get a job. So I just didn't believe that. So here I head out, I go to the interview, I liked him a lot, but I didn't get that feeling. You know what I'm talking about? That feeling where you feel like this is what God's wanting you to do. So I literally, Coach, I swear it's a true story. I get in my truck at Douglas County High School. Right before I start my truck, I said, well, God, maybe I'm looking for something that's just not out there, because I'd already kind of passed on another head opportunity, and I was like, I didn't feel like I should pursue. And, but I literally said that out loud. And, because, you keep passing on them, you're not going to get one, right? If you're lucky enough to get one. And so I just felt like the feeling wasn't there. And so I started my truck. I started to pull out of the parking lot, and my phone rang. And it was Scott Justice from West Hall High School. Okay, he was, at that time, Scott was the AD, Dr. Williams was the principal. So he calls, and I'm talking to him and says, hey, Coach, we'd really like to see if we can get you up here. We want to show the property, spend some time, but we'll come meet you if you want. And so I literally said this, Coach. I said, what are you doing right now? He said, what do you mean? I said, I'm willing to drive up right now if you want. I'm already taking the day off from school, right? It's not like I got all these personal days. And so he said, well, hold on. He put me on hold, and he came back and he said, well, come on. I said, well, you got to send me the address because I have no idea where I'm going, right? And I told him coming back. So anyway, I made the trek from Douglas County High School up to West Hall. They're not next to each other.
No, okay? They're not. So, they're not even close. So
I get up there, and I must have spent 5 hours with Scott, us talking and everything else. So I got in my truck to head back home to have to go to Woodland the next day, and I was like, I'm gonna be the next head coach at West Hall. And so I get home and I tell my wife, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna be the next head coach at West Hall. She said, West Hall? Where in Douglas County is West Hall? I swear, because when I left that morning, I was going to Douglas County. There was no, and I said, he called when I came out of the interview, so I went ahead and drove up there, and I spent all day with him, and I really feel like that's where I'm going. And so she said, so hold on a second. So he called you after your interview this morning. You drove all the way up to Oakwood, Georgia, and he offered you the job already? I said, well, no. So now she thinks I'm back crazy, right? I said, no, I'm just telling you, and then here's where my first with our legendary mocks comes into play. Okay, so back then we all hovered around the building. So I'm wondering, and so what I didn't know is Scott's wife, they were having their first baby, which, boy, he is a stud golfer, by the way, now. But anyway, so I'm wondering and everything else. Well, all of a sudden, these initials pop up at West Hall TL. And I'm like, I don't know, is that me? You can talk yourself out of things when a little bit of time goes on, because, of course, it's Christmas time and whatnot. And so I had a buddy contact you to ask, would you tell who the initials were? And you sit back, Tony Lotti, and I was like, okay, I think I'm still on God's page here. And so I go there, and it had been rough for them. There had been 4 head coaches in 4 years, and they hadn't been in the playoffs or 1 in 12 years. And the senior class, the last time there was any success was when they were in kindergarten. And so, I just got in there, and a lot of prayer, a lot of work, a lot of good people, and I took over the youth program, and we just really went at it. And so here, second year, we managed to get in the playoffs, and it's funny because we're playing Dawson County and Jeff Lee was the head coach there, which I really liked Jeff. And so we get to the end there, it's like 3rd down and 6, and I was like, gosh, if we can pick up first down, we can go victory and take a knee, and this will be the greatest thing ever. And so Hunter Atkinson, who was one of the guys who played him, and I pulled him aside during that timeout, and I said, do you want to go to playoffs? He said, yes, sir. I said, son, I need 8 yards. He said, Coach, give me the ball. We put him in Wildcat. Coach, he must have picked up 15, 20. He dragging people, right? So we did the victory, and just taking that in and seeing the smile on their faces. And then the next year we won the region, finished 9-1, and then ran into a buzzsaw of Coach Nolan and his boy at Oconee County. Zeb kind of hurt us in that first round, but seeing the joy in, we were able to we were in the playoffs 5 out of the 6 years I was there, And what's so cool, Coach, is I have pictures of kids that were in the youth program and then their senior year with me, and that just means everything to me. I say all the time, I want 5 years old to graduation, and I hope and pray that I can get that. It seems like this day and age, it may be, I don't know, a big time wish list, but and so then the craziest thing that happened, because I had told Debbie, because like I said, we live on the south side, so we moved all the way up here on Faith, and I told her, so we lost to St. Pius in the playoffs. I was at West Hall. And I came home that night, and she was like, you're supposed to be there. She's, how all wives are. They're like, look how far y'all get, blah, 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 blah. And all this stuff we really don't want to listen to, but we know they're right. And so she starts telling me that, and I said, honey, you don't understand. I said, I got the feeling again. She said, what do you mean? I said, I got a feeling that I just coached my last game at West Hall. She said, there's no way. I said, I'm telling you. So we said, well, let's just wait and see. And so our son, of course, played football for Wisconsin. And so I get a call from an old friend that I worked with at Union Road, because that's the other thing, trying to teach the young people about that, it's that who knows you and who you know kind of thing. And Ralph Ely, he called me and he says, hey, he said, I'll never forget it. He said, are you and Debbie going to the Big Ten championship game? So Anthony, I said, yeah, we're flying out in the morning, so I need you to think about something like that. I need you to think about coming here. We need you to see if you can come help us. And I was like, oh, so that's where I'm going. So anyway, I did not want to leave West Hall. I'm still close with a lot of people over there. You build those relationships, and I say it all the time that if this is only about a 48-minute game, then we don't have anything. It has to be bigger than that. So anyway, I go over, and I felt like that's what I was supposed to do, and I go over and try to help Appalachia, and we get things to, turn around, surprise people, and the kids, and we get into the playoffs, and things are going well. And here, it's one of those things that, we make the playoffs, and Rich McWhorter, who I love to death, he was at Jackson County at the time, and those guys, and Alex Crawford, and all the guys. You just get to know everybody, right? When you went around in the region a little bit. And so, but I wasn't feeling good, Coach. I couldn't put my finger on it. I was dealing with exhaustion, and here everything was happy, and I just wasn't feeling good. And so I went to our team doctor, and do you want to hear this part?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I put our team doctor aside. That's where else I've been blessed, is have great relationships with the trainer and the team doctor. And I just told him, I said, something's wrong. I don't feel right. And so he said, well, come into the office. I'll take some blood work. And CJ Olson, and I always name these guys because these people saved my life. And so he comes over, he does all these tests, Coach, and everything comes back blood test-wise as being normal. Everything. And so he's like, and I told him, I said, Doc, I said, we're missing something. I'm telling you, something's not right. If I had sat in a chair for more than 5 minutes, I couldn't get up on my own. It was we're exhausted as coaches, right? But this was different, and I knew it was different. And so he said, well, come on back. So then, you ready for this? So he runs a test of my testosterone. And so it comes back abnormal. So he calls me and he says, hey, I think I may have found why you're feeling so tired and everything. And I said, bad news is, got to wait 6 weeks. I got to test you again. Otherwise, insurance won't pay for the treatment. I was like, all right. So we labored through that. Of course, now I'm even lower. So we start me on this patch. So I'm wearing this patch 24 hours a day, right? 7 days a week, changing it constantly. And so I tell him at practice, I said, Doc, I'm feeling worse. I don't think it's working. He said, that's impossible. It's got to be working. So then he has me come back and he tested again. He said, well, let me test it. And so they had to wait 6 more weeks because of insurance. So anyway, they tested it and he calls me and he said, I need to refer you somewhere. I said, what's wrong? My testosterone total level is at 21. And I was like, I said, what should it be? He said, well, let's put it this way. Your age, you're not that old. It should be in the 300s. So they refer me to a urologist. They go in, cut me, put testosterone in to try to at least, stop that part. They run another test, and next thing you know, they send me to an endocrinologist. And they're like, so now things are jacked up, I guess, is the best way to put it. Well, Dr. Fong in Gainesville, which if you need an endocrinologist, I recommend him highly. Long Street Clinic, there, I throw that piece out there for him. So he didn't say it all. And he said, yeah, I'll take some blood. But then he called me that night. He says, hey, can you come back in the morning? I said, why? And he said, I need to confirm this blood test. And he said, I said, yeah. I said, you found something, didn't you? He said, well, I'm concerned. I was like, okay. So I went back out. A few hours later, he calls me. He says, hey, I need to send you on a referral for a brain scan. And I was like, how did we get there? How did we get from, all these blood tests are fine. How did we get to a brain scan? So he sends me for a brain scan. Coach, do you know what my chart is? Do you have that?
Yes.
Okay. I've never had a love-hate relationship like the one I have with my chart. So it's great, and I love the fact that I get the results immediately. The problem is I get the results immediately, and then you don't know. So here I go to get the brain scan. Debbie goes with me, and we're down there. The guy, one of the technicians that's doing the MRI, his kid played at fire bench. He knew who I was. So we're talking, cutting up before the MRI. He didn't talk to me the same after the MRI. And so when I came out, I told Debbie, I said, they saw something. And she said, what do you mean? And she asked him, he said, well, we've already submitted it. You should hear something in 24, 48 hours. Now, I live, if anybody up here listens, I live approximately, at best, 8 minutes from the hospital where I had this MRI. By the time I got home, Coach, I was changing clothes and then go back to school. Change clothes, and my watch dinged, you have a new test result in my chart. So I pull up and I start reading, and it's measurements, and it starts talking about, a mass that is in my head and the measurements of where, and it talks about in the carotid artery and everything else. And I remember just looking at Debbie saying, I have a brain tumor. And that was a Friday morning, and my doctor didn't get the results till Monday. So what do you think I did Friday, Saturday, and Sunday? Boom, I'm on that keyboard, right? Doing the worst thing you can do, Google, and I can assure you there's nothing good that comes up if you Google search that. And so anyway, the doctor calls me that Monday morning, and he says, did you get the results? I said, yeah. He said, I'm being honest, I didn't put you off. I just now saw it. He said, what'd you think? I said, I don't know, you tell me. Y'all usually take measurements of things that are supposed to be in people's heads? He said, no, we don't. And I said, what happened now? He said, I got to do a stat referral for you to a brain surgeon and also a neuro-ophthalmologist because it's not only at your carotid artery, but it's also. And so a week and a half later, I was laying on an operating table in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and to have brain surgery to remove the tumor. And so I was in the hospital for a couple of weeks, had some complications, and then they let me come home because I was kind of battling a little depression. The weird thing about before I went in is I had to go and tell my principal. I was like, and this is what I hated so much because I feel like I cheated those kids at Appalachia because I was gone. I wasn't there for spring, any of that. I wasn't there for any of the summer. There was none of that. And we ended up not winning that next year. And, a new region that was loaded. And it was just a perfect storm. And so anyway, I had the brain surgery. I finally get well enough where they let me travel home. Because I wanted to see the kids. I wanted to see my grandkids. And so we're here. And then what happens is I start feeling worse. Because I was supposed to go back in 5 days. And so everybody could check on me. I had like teams of doctors. And I had appointments lined up the whole day. Well, I started getting worse. So when we get back there, I even told her, I said, something's wrong. And she went and took some blood. She said, you're not going home. You're going straight back to the hospital. Coach, next thing I know, things are going really bad, and they're rushing me to ICU. And then I spent a week in ICU, and it was one of these things, and I'm telling you this story, so hopefully somebody's listening will understand. I was in there, and what I was suffering from at the time that was putting me in a bad spot was what's called severe acute hyponatremia. So what was happening was my brain was swelling, and the sodium was all in my body, and so my sodium levels were tanking. And basically, and here, I stayed at Holly Ann last night. That's why I'm a doctor too, right? But what happened was, I knew studying it, typically between 135 and 145 is where your normal is. If you drop down below 130, then they usually will put you in the hospital. So when I was at that appointment, I was at 127. If you get to the 120 and below, you go into a coma and you die. Well, they couldn't stop it. And so the last thing that it did was 121. So we knew I was in trouble, right? And so I just said this prayer. It was literally, and hope you don't mind me telling this story, but I said to God, I said, okay, I'm ready to come. And if this is because we don't know what our time is, right? Or how we're going. I was like, if this is it for me, I'm ready to come. But if you let me stay, I really think I can still do some things, and if you'll let me stay, and I just had that prayer, and I tell you right now, CC1 is one of those angel voices for me, and it just kept playing in my ICU, the goodness of God, and I just picture my children and my grandchildren, my wife, and my whole brothers, and and my family and the kids and everybody, and I had resolved myself that I just didn't know what was happening, and I was totally vulnerable, and I was at the will of whatever God was, whatever His will for me was. And so then out of nowhere, my sodium level started to change because the treatments they were giving me, they can't bring it up. And so anyway, they took me off of everything, and I was literally on nothing, and my sodium levels started to creep back up. And so it was one of those things. So for me, my verse is 1 Peter 5:10, and that's after your season of suffering, God in all His grace will restore, strengthen, and confirm you. And that's been what I've held on to, is that, as a coach, we talk about seasons, right? And every season ends, and I just needed something simple I could hold on to. And so that right there, that season of suffering, I was like, okay, season, it's going to end. Good, bad, or indifferent, the season's going to end. I just got to hang on and keep going through that. And so that's my thing is, what I cling on, it's actually on the front of my truck, and hope that people will do the same thing. Is, the big thing is to be grateful. I'm extremely grateful for every day I have and whatnot. I'm good now. Checkups all good. Everything, God put His hand on it and said, all right, stay a while longer. But it's be grateful, stay vertical, 1 Peter 5:10. And sorry, I kind of threw that out there, but if you don't get me, you got to have the whole me, right? And that's the big part of me.
I remember when all that went down and you going into detail about it. I know from personal study that the sodium channels in your brain are what control the neurons firing. So your sodium level it is imperative that it stay where it's supposed to stay, or the neurons quit firing. That's what puts you into a coma, because the sodium potassium gates in the neurons are what causes, like when I was a senior in high school, my senior paper, I wrote a theoretical cure for Parkinson's disease.
Really?
So I studied, and what I figured, or what I thought, was that when your neurons fire, that, potassium is a positive charge and sodium's a negative charge. And every time a neuron fires, they flip. And the sodium potassium gate flips it back. Well, people that have Parkinson's disease, one of the issues is that it gets stuck, for lack of a medical term. You're stuck, and that's what causes the tremors. And I posited that if you could figure out what charge you had, you could trick the neuron into being more positive on the outside or negative, whichever way it needed to go. If you injected a metabolite through with that charge, you wouldn't change the charge, but you could make the nerve cell think that it was more positive on one side or negative on the other side. So when you said all that, I was like, oh yeah, that's not good. Your sodium levels are very. That's what makes your brain work. And I mean, we're not talking about just open up a thing of table salt and go after it. I mean, it's just a totally different kind of issue. But I remember when all that happened, and then you got honored by the Atlanta Falcons, and I mean,
and what's funny is it's funny because I was doing an interview with them down at Mercedes-Benz, and one of the executives, because Debbie was with me, of course, and I've been very fortunate that I've tried to do anything I could do to help the Falcons and the community efforts and things like that, whether it was, the youth things that they do with the Play 60 or, just the coaches clinics, the mom things that they do. And so over the years, I just kind of always did that. And so here, the reality was that it's the first time in my career, we didn't win a game that year. And here coming off a playoff, and I wasn't there, and I hated that. And one of the executives told my wife, because she said they said it was important to know this, that you getting a brain tumor did not get you this award. This was a cumulative deal, and I guess they could sense that. I was like, well, I don't know. I struggled with that at first, to be honest with you, because I was like, I just try to do right by people and be there for people. And someone will get it, someone won't. A situation this year with a playing time issue and a kid, and I guess I got to be real careful what I say here, but, this is the same kid that's still coming to me with issues he was dealing with. But, the parent got upset and just, pitching a fit and going all through that. But like I said, I have to stay consistent in what's fair to everybody. The kid who was there that took the beating against, he's getting nailed against Roswell, Gainesville, and Milton back to back. He deserved the opportunity to keep going, and we kept winning, and then we pulled out the upset at the end and to get in. And so, it's one of those things that, for me, I pray over every decision, and I think the people who are closest to me or have been around me, my prayer is that they know what my heart is, and they've seen it at the places I've been. You know what, Coach? If the truth of this is if I had my way, I'd still be at Union Grove. I'd have never left. God, pushed me to have to go to Woodland. That pushed me because everybody's like, don't take that West Hall job, don't. And then here, go to Appalachia, and I struggle with that bad. I'm tight with Mike. Mike was my DC where I brought him over there, and when I took the job, I come to Seckinger to help because Kelly Poff, who I've known back from Woodland, who's one of my principals, she's our AD, and when Stan asked me about coming over, and to try to help Seckinger, it just didn't quite get off to the start that they had hoped. And so, half my staff came with me, the other half stayed there. And when that tragedy happened, my daughter happened to be on campus. And, I instantly talked to Mike and, checking on him. And he told me, I don't know what's going on. I'm locked down in the field house. We were in the stadium. And then I literally was watching the helicopter up top and watching the live feed and talking to my daughter and telling her, honey, tell me what, because they were evacuating school. I said, tell me what coaches you see. Tell me each one you see, and just that horrific thing. And it's one of those things that, oh man, Miss Army and Ricky, I knew them both, obviously. Heck, I gave Ricky my clothes. So when I left there to come here, because I was trying to bring him over the year before, but it's one of those things that I had this conversation with my coaches today. So one of the things I don't think you should do, and since we're in the job market now, I'm going to go ahead and throw this out there because I think there's going to be people listening that are going to go play. One of my pet peeves that I think is just wrong is if you go into a job, like I said, when I went into West Hall, it was not good. It wasn't good at Appalachia. And then it just hadn't gotten off to the right start at Seckinger. I think they were outscored 280 to 12 and didn't win a game. And it was new school. And unless you've done a new school before, you don't understand what that entails. But what I was going to say is, as it goes in, I think the worst thing you could do is badmouth the staff that was there before you. I think that is so wrong. I'm against that. Number one, you did not sit in that seat the whole time with that person. You don't know the ins and outs of every decision they made. It just didn't work out. It just didn't work out. But there is nothing productive about trashing the staff that you are replacing. And I hope it's okay. You don't mind me saying that. But to me, it's like, okay, look, assess the situation. And, start working to fix it one piece at a time. But to me, don't be counterproductive because you don't know. And so it's like, I guess that's my thing. I try very hard, just focus on, what you got to do. And it's funny because I don't care what school you're at. If you're not there sitting in the seat, you don't know what it's like. and you don't, like I said, I use that Wizard of Oz, because it's like nobody knows what I deal with on a daily and nightly basis with what I'm doing right now. Nobody knows but me, right? And that's part of the leadership role that I believe in. But I'm going to pour into the kids wherever I'm at. I'm going to be wherever I'm at until God tells me I'm not going to be there anymore. And that's how I look at it. And I just really, to sum it up, and whenever I talk about it, and I kind of challenge some guys at a speaking event I was doing, that you either have a calling or you have a job, and you have to decide which one that is. If you have a calling, I tell you this, it's going to be the hardest thing you ever did, but it'll be the most rewarding, 100%. If you have a job and it's all about wins and losses, are you on a quest for significance, or are you on a quest for importance? And there's a big difference. There's nothing wrong with if what you want to do is be that 500 game winner and state champions and here they're cheering your name. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you're in for. But you just got to understand the difference between the two is that a quest for importance, well, that's ego-driven. And a quest for significance is people-driven. And I think that's the big thing is as we hit this job market, make sure, if you're looking at something, make sure it's the right fit, and make sure that you do your due diligence beforehand. And that the bottom line is, you owe it to people to not take a job to get a job. I just believe that. And some of them disagree. They say, no, some of them need to be stepping stones and whatnot. Well, is that really being fair to where you're at? That's just my 2 cents.
Well, Coach, you sure have been significant to a lot of people over the years. I am one of them. And I'm so glad we finally got to meet at that recruiting fair.
I've known you and my wife for 20 years. I joke with you about that all the time because I think there was a passing league at Tech, and I had a situation happen here at school that I had to stay here for, and they were like, Coach Lamb, come over there. I said, golly, am I ever going to get to meet that guy in person?
Well, like you said, God put you where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be, so there's that. So that and like you, I believe the same thing. So I just appreciate you. I appreciate everything you do for the young people of our state and our schools, and how you pour into not just them, but the staffs and the families of the people that you work with. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with us.
Oh, Coach, thank you. I really appreciate you having me on. Like I said, I hope it was what you were looking for, but I was just being real with you and kind of sharing and be a little vulnerable there and sharing some things that maybe I shouldn't have shared. But at the end of the day, like I said, if you asked me to be me and share me, so that's what I tried to do.
Well, thanks, Coach. I sure do appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Coach.